Welcome and Vanakkam. A couple of days ago, I posted a video about the contents of which I was initially somewhat diffident. Not that I doubted or I was unsure of the truthfulness of what I included in that video. I was uncertain only about how my viewers at large, many of whom I do not know personally, unfortunately, would take it and what impact it would have on them. Would it influence them positively? Would it influence them negatively? I do not want to cause anyone to stumble. Oftentimes, we act in public life with good intentions, but as T.S. Eliot, the English poet, says, between the intention and the effect, there is always a shadow. So, when we make utterances in public, we have to factor this reality into the whole grammar of our exercise. Now, what was that video about? Why was I unsure of it? And what happened after that? I'm sure you'd all be keenly interested to know. That video was about the mistake I committed in assessing Rahul Gandhi's potential to be a successful or effective or relevant politician, given that the practice of politics had become somewhat modern, unhealthy. And I knew Rahul to be a person of innate goodness. So it's a matter of some debate if a person who is by nature good and refuses to deviate from his goodness will prove effective or will even survive in the domain of politics. Very often, this question is answered in the negative, even if we don't have many instances of people of this kind having tried politics and perished in the process. Now, it was difficult for me to finally decide that I should go public with it because it's not common sight these days to see anyone at all making public confessions, even private confessions that individuals make before their priest in order to clean up their bosoms, as it were, is looked down upon. And I myself have gross doubts about it, about the wholesomeness of a practice like that, which I have already expressed, and therefore I don't want to repeat what's already said. So, given that, surely there is a margin of uncertainty about making public confessions. You would come across people who make public boasts and who create larger than life images of themselves as individuals who are infallible, impregnable, individuals who are beyond the vicissitudes of time, so on and so forth. As to admitting that one was indeed wrong in assessing a human being, I believe is pretty uncommon. Now, given that, suppose I went ahead and did that, how would that be understood? If what I'm going to do is not going to help people, why would I do it? After all, my intention is to prove as beneficial as possible the life of people who are well meaning. But after a fair bit of hesitation, I finally felt very strongly convinced that I owed it to myself that I went public with it. Now, I will say nothing more about the contents of that video. I would now like to come very quickly to the impact it has had on many, many viewers. in fact, hundreds of viewers. That video received the kind of reception and welcome that I couldn't have dreamt of in my wildest dreams. That challenges me to think, and what I'm sharing through this video is the fruit of that thinking. So let's get straight away into the heart of the matter. Now, among the responses that I've got, there are several individuals from far and near who say very enthusiastically, and I'm so deeply moved by the sincerity of their words. They state very emphatically that that video has had, according to them, a liberating impact on them. Now, let me indicate what they mean by the liberating impact. Several of them have revealed that they had gathered a very negative impression about Rahul Gandhi based almost entirely on Sri Subramania Swami's inveterate hatred towards the Gandhi Nehru family. He has taken it upon himself as his life mission to cause maximum embarrassment to that family and to degrade their public image. He may have personal motives for it, and I am no one to judge him. But the kind of singular focus with which he has gone about that task is something that sometimes unnerves me, and also and makes me ask the question, why is it that certain individuals can go about doing the work of hurting others with such superhuman determination and investment of energy? And why is it that hardly anyone is found these days to acknowledge the goodness of someone? And in fact, the goodness of someone who is thus being derided or degraded. Surely even Subramania Swami will not believe or insist that the objects of his attack from the Nehru-Gandhi family, he would say dynasty, are diabolic characters and there isn't a touch of goodness about them. He has decided to attack them, degrade them, and to erase them from public life, at least from public respect, if not from public life. And perhaps he thought that by doing so, his party would look up to him as a savior, and he would gather great personal distinction, merit, and worth in the eyes of his party. His party really means two individuals, Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi and Sri Amit Shah. And once you gain that attention and that respect, then of course many other things follow, and I don't have to state what. But unfortunately, it turned out that the great, wise Subramania Swami was grossly mistaken. Had he read Shakespeare, he would have been wiser, particularly Shakespeare's play Richard II. There, Bolingbroke, one of the main characters, the main character other than Richard II, Bolingbroke will be Richard II's successor, does not trust the very same persons who rebelled against the king and made it possible for him to dethrone the king and to occupy the throne of the king. Why? Because Bolingbroke is wise enough to realize that the individuals who could without any pang of conscience turn traitors to their king today will also turn against him tomorrow when he becomes king. So the irony is that the more passionate, pointed, and determined you are in order to discredit an individual or a family, in order to gain the favorable attention of a party and its members, unfortunately, the more you become suspect in their eyes And they come to the conclusion that it is a very dangerous thing to trust this gentleman because, after all, he is no fool. His abilities are enormous, supernatural. And anytime he can turn the fire of his supernatural ability against us. And therefore, it's wise to keep him at a safe distance. It may be because of this reason that Dr. Subramania Swami, who is, I say it again and again, one of the most competent, well-informed, encyclopedic individual that we have at the moment, he did not receive any of the recognitions that he expected would come his way after 2014. And today his life is full of bitterness. Now, I doubt if Dr. Swami will have the freedom of the spirit, the inner freedom, to acknowledge that he committed a mistake. I doubt if he would have, because apart from being a person of encyclopedic knowledge and a person of supernatural determination to pursue his goal with monomaniacal obsession, Dr. Swami lacks the grace to be open, to be candid, and to acknowledge that he could go wrong, he could commit a mistake. And to the extent he lacks that inner flexibility, the inner resilience, he would remain stuck and he would become increasingly frozen within himself. And I'm afraid that sad reality is already evident. It's painful for me to refer to such things, but therefore I'll only make a mention of it and then pull back. I do not enjoy anyone's discomfort. But the fact is, and I don't think many would disagree with me, that Dr. Subramanian Swami, this man of great genius, is today in a state of embarrassment, at least of neglect, and therefore of deep resentment, because that comes out through every word that he utters these days. Now, let me come back to myself. When I finally decided in favor of going public with the mistake I committed, in order to be fair to an individual and in order to do justice to my own conscience, I had, or that particular decision of mine, I'm glad to say, has had a very healthy influence on hundreds of individuals far and wide whom I could not reckon at the important point of deciding to go public with it. And many of them have written back to me saying that because I had the courage to put my reputation on the line and to cut a sorry figure, if you like, confessing my mistake before everyone, because I showed that courage, they also now have the courage to realize that they, unduly influenced and blindly influenced by Dr. Swami's professed malevolence towards the Nehru-Gandhi family, they too had come to acquire and harbor a negative and pejorative image of Rahul Gandhi. And after seeing my video, and some of them say they've seen it more than once, they began to rethink their position. And they realized that it did them no good to harbor somebody else's grudge and to be, therefore, the resting ground of somebody else's untruths. And consequently, they gain the freedom to open their eyes and their minds and realize that, after all, in this young man, there is something uniquely good. And they began to experience that something like the dark clouds lifted from the horizon of their mind. And today, they see Rahul Gandhi in a very different light. So, my dear friends, let me tell you very clearly what gives me the greatest happiness in this context, and that is, without knowing it, without even intending to be so, or intending to do so, without having any such conscious intention, I became instrumental in enabling a few of my fellow human beings to emerge from the twilight zone of having to live in an unhappy and an uncomfortable state about themselves as repositories of somebody else's falsehood. And today they have the inner hygiene of acknowledging the truth about someone else. Now that is what we call inner liberation. Inner liberation. And this is the power of truth. The power of truth is not that it goes and destroys your enemy. Even the enemy who spreads falsehood about you, that's not the power of truth. Don't expect wrong kinds of power from truth. When we say truth is powerful, truth will triumph, etc., we should understand that statement right, which I did not. It's this experience that enabled me to think more deeply and understand this phenomenon more clearly, and that's what I'm sharing with you. Today I understand the power of truth in this manner. It's not the destructive power of, say, disabling, disarming, and destroying your enemies who are spreading falsehood about you. It is a power. It's a wonderful, wholesome, liberating power of enabling those who have been influenced unfairly, unhealthily by this propaganda of falsehood, and therefore shut in a den of falsehood, and who had to be in that state of inner disrelationship with themselves for no reason and no gain to themselves. The power of truth opens the cage in which they are, that cage of discomfort and disquietude, which is unknown and unseen by anyone. It opens that cage and allows them to come out and experience the freshness of freedom. That's a tremendous thing. That's a tremendous thing. So I have to be honest with you, what has made this possible is the person of Rahul Gandhi. The fact that Rahul Gandhi has endured all the privations he has had to, stuck to his station, proved himself, which challenged me to think about my negative impressions about him, not negative impressions as much as my apprehensions about his suitability to this so-called moral jungle of politics. Because he stood his station, proved himself, he paved the way to my correcting myself. And because I corrected myself, and because, if you like, God gave me the freedom, the courage to come out in the open and share the truth about myself, that has had a very beneficial, liberating influence, that the power of truth liberates, liberating influence on many, many, many people who too had fallen prey to this huge, mammoth, orchestrated campaign of obloquy or vilification or character assassination or image degradation inflicted on this young man. And many people lapped it up not knowing why it was being done, not knowing if the charges made against him or the label stuck on him, namely that he is a mere papu, was well founded. Was there any substance to it? Or was it merely some kind of a fanciful piece of invention, motivated by some diabolic intention to show a person in a poor light which he did not deserve? Without going into any of these things, many people lapped it up. And they realized in course of time that this corrupted them, but they did not have the guts to come out in the open and say, yes, unfortunately this happened to me. I believe that a force higher than me used me in this context to risk self-abnegation or risk the possibility of being ridiculed and derided in public by opening up to the public about my failure, in order to lead those people who too had been influenced negatively by this malevolent campaign, to leave their state of inner disquietude behind and to enter a new phase of freedom and inner hygiene. I think that's a tremendous thing. And I make bold to say that a temple of thoughts is just about the only social network site where such things are happening. About this, I don't have the slightest hesitation. I'm not saying this by way of boasting. I'm stating this by way of informing my fellow wayfarers, my fellow travelers, that there is something beautiful happening in our midst. And I also want to share with each one of them that after all, as we have always heard it said, honesty is the best policy. I want to tell them honesty is the only policy.